The Minardi team competed in Formula One for 21 seasons from 1985 to 2005, and despite spending most of their time as a backmarker, they had a few memorable moments. Some of the most memorable achievements of Minardi are Pierluigi Martini leading the team's only lap on lap 40 of the 1989 Portuguese Grand Prix, or Martini taking the team's only front row start with a second at the 1990 US Grand Prix. Another Minardi moment that is often remembered is Luca Badoer retiring from fourth after a brilliant drive late in the 1999 European Grand Prix. However, despite these Minardi moments that are more often remembered, one moment that does not seem to be as remembered in their history is the team's best ever result. What they achieved this day was only accomplished once more in the team's history. Before going further, if you enjoy the video, please like and share it and leave a comment. Also, if you want to see more similar content, then subscribe to the channel. To go and find the best team result in Minardi's history, we have to go back to their earlier years at the 1989 British Grand Prix. The weekend was a very important one for Minardi and the other teams at the back of the grid, as the race was the final one of the first half of the season, which meant that there would be a change in the teams that would have to pre-qualify in the second half of the year. Back in 1989, 39 cars were attempting to qualify each weekend, and in order to avoid them all being on track together in a normal qualifying session, a special pre-qualifying session was held Friday morning with 13 cars and only the fastest four moving on to be the 30 cars that could attempt to qualify for the race. The 13 teams that did not have to participate in pre-qualifying were the top 13 in the 1988 constructor standings, but for the second half of 1989, it would be the top 13 after the British Grand Prix that avoided pre-qualifying. Heading into the weekend, Minardi had not only yet to score a point in the season, but they had also yet to even finish a race with either of their two cars, while Onyx was sitting on the pre-qualifying bubble with 2 points. This meant that Minardi had to score at least 2 points, which was a fifth-place finish at the time, to avoid being relegated to pre-qualifying for the second half of the year. Autosport even ran a headline after the previous race in France, in which Onyx scored their 2 points with a fifth-place finish, saying, "Onyx escapes pre-qualifying," so the idea of Minardi or any other team jumping them was thought to be very unlikely. For a team that had only scored a single point in their history, had yet to qualify in the top 10 in 1989, and had not even run a single lap in a points-paying position that year with either of their cars, this certainly looked like a near impossible task. As the weekend started, though, things appeared to be looking up at Minardi. The team had an update to their radiator layout, and lead driver Pierluigi Martini put it to good use to run 8th in the first practice session, while teammate Luis Perez Salo was 15th, and they then placed 10th and 13th with Martini leading the way in the Friday qualifying session. Martini didn't improve his time in Saturday qualifying, while Perez Sala did slightly, but they would still line up 11th and 15th, meaning both drivers matched their best grid position of the season to date. Heading into the race, it was still looking good for Minardi, with Martini setting the 6th fastest time in the warm-up session Sunday morning. Both drivers had a good start to the race, with Martini moving up to 8th on the opening lap and Perez Sala to 14th, but it looked like the day would turn sour quickly. After 5 laps, Martini came into the pits with an overheating issue. He would rejoin the race, but did so after losing about 30 seconds and dropping to 23rd position. Despite being at the back of the field, Martini did not give up and quickly started gaining positions. 10 laps after his stop, he had gained 5 spots to move up to 18th, and then gained a place 4 the next 5 laps to move up to 14th on lap 20 of the 64-lap race, and was still within striking distance of many of the cars ahead. Meanwhile, Perez Sala was holding steady, gaining a few places from cars that retired, and was up to 11th at the same point. Another 10 laps later, on lap 30, a couple more cars had retired, along with a few more overtakes by Martini, and the Minardis were now running 9th and 10th, with Perez Sala ahead and Martini quickly closing in on his teammate. Martini finally caught Perez Sala on lap 38 and not only overtook his teammate, but also the Lotus of Satoru Nakajima that lap as well to move up into 7th. A lap later, Perez Sala also passed Nakajima, and the Lola of Filipe Alio retired from 6th, moving both drivers up another position. After such a dismal start, Martini was now running in the final points-paying position of 6th, with Perez Sala just a couple seconds behind him. Progress from here on out would be difficult as the next car ahead on track was the March of Mauricio Gugelmin about 35 seconds ahead of Martini, and both Minardis were lapping similar lap times to Gugelmin. Perez Sala also had to start worrying about what was behind him as well, as the Ligier of Olivier Grouillard was quickly gaining and looking to take the place from the second Minardi. On lap 55, Minardi got a brilliant stroke of luck when Gugelmin's gearbox failed, promoting the Minardis to 5th and 6th. For a team that had just scored a single point in their team history, they now had both cars in points-paying positions, and even better, the result would keep them out of pre-qualifying for the second half of the year. All they had to do was hope their cars would last the final laps and that Perez Sala could keep Grouillard behind them. As Perez Sala and Grouillard came across the line each time, Grouillard was always less than a second behind the Minardi and oftentimes within half a second, but each time Perez Sala would still come back around ahead. As both Minardi drivers came around to start their last lap, they both held their position. Martini then came around the next time for Minardi's first finish of the season and the team's best ever result to date with a 5th place finish. Even better for the team, this meant they had successfully escaped pre-qualifying for the remainder of the year. Just over 6 seconds later, Perez Sala came around in the second Minardi to take the final point, holding off Grouillard by 0.8 of a second. Who would have thought that a team that had not had either of their cars finish one of the season's first 7 races would have both of them finish in the points? Minardi's performance would pick up the remainder of the season with them finishing in the points 2 more times, both in the hands of Martini, and would finish 1989 11th in the Constructors' Championship. Martini would also become a good qualifier the rest of the year, qualifying in the top 10 in 4 of the final 8 races, including 3 top 5 grid spots. Perez Sala would also add in a qualifying to 9th in Portugal, but the point he scored that day would end up being the only one of his career. In some ways, the 1989 British Grand Prix represented a small rise in the tiny Italian team from a backmarker to a brief spell as a legitimate midfielder. While the main celebrations that day would have been the points to stay out of pre-qualifying the rest of the season, it also represented something else. Both Minardi cars finished in the points, and for a team on the rise that put in a few good performances over the next few years, it felt like something that could have happened again. It did happen again one other time, but it was under very different circumstances. At the 2005 United States Grand Prix, Christian Alberts finished 5th in the first Minardi and Patrick Friesacher 6th in the second one, but this was of course the controversial race in which only 6 cars started after all the Michelin runners withdrew. While Minardi would secure 3 fourth-place finishes, which were better results for an individual car, the 1989 British Grand Prix would be the only time the team would have both of their cars finish in the points in a full grid race, making it one of the most memorable moments in the team's 21-year history. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and let me know what are some of your favorite moments in Minardi's history. Leave a comment below to let me know. Thanks for watching.